Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clint Lee. I'm in Dr. Calloway's Microbiome Ecology of the Rumen class this year here at UGA. And for our second project, I have decided to talk about the effects of creep feeding on the microbiome and beef calves specifically. This topic is very important to me because as a fourth generation cow calf producer myself and then working on the UGA beef and sheep unit where we run a cow calf herd here in Athens, this is something I've found that throughout the years is very important and being able to get those calves off their mama and on feed and continue to grow efficiently. So I decided like with this class and with some of the interest it has brought up through the microbiome that I would like to link that creep feeding process back to the microbiome. So to begin this presentation, I just kind of want to go over a quick little summary of what creep feeding is. So it's a common practice that can be found throughout beef cattle industry in the United States nowadays. I know most cattle farmers in the industry today that have a good decent herd size all the way down to they have about 5 or 10 in the backyard that they know all their names that they tend to do creep feeding in some element of it in general. So basically, creep feeding, the definition, if you look it up, is a method of supplementing the diet of young animals, primarily in beef calves, by offering feed to animals who are still nursing. So when we talk about offering feed to these animals who are still nursing, it is primarily given to just them and not the rest of the herd. So we're able to focus in on them calves themselves. As you can see in the picture that is being used as a background for this slide, these calves of that smaller size are able to walk through the panels and walk through the gates to get to that feed that their mamas, on the other hand, are not able to get to. So therefore, we're able to keep up with their average intake as a group. We're able to know who's going in, who's going out by watching them, and we're able to make sure that nobody's getting a feed that shouldn't be. This is used to ensure calves are preconditioned before they go to feedlots, then before they go into the next growth phase, wherever they're headed after that. Is shown considerably less weaning stress whenever they are able to continue on feed throughout that entire process of weaning, and it's not that they are on grass and on mama one day and then the next day they are on feed and on grass and without their mama nowhere to be found. Also, it has been found that with creep feeding, weight gain has been a positive factor as well. It has helped to increase that average daily gain through that first phase after weaning and continue on throughout their entire life. So creep feeding has several effects on the microbiome that I found. Some of the effects it can have is on the rumen communities inside that rumen itself. So the bacteria that are in it, how that bacteria interacts with each other, which ones are prevalent, which ones are decreased. Some diets have been found to have positive effects, some have found negative. And then there's also several that we'll talk about a little later on that had no effect at all, which can be a positive and a negative if you look at it in the different ways. Also, it was found that the timing and age of weaning can influence the rumen bacteria. While this is not specific to creep feeding, since creep feeding is done around that time of weaning, it is kind of cool to bring into effect of how we can use all of this together to really influence our calves' productivity. And then certain bacteria, like I said before, can be seen to increase with creep feeding. So one study that I found that kind of focused in on average daily gain is they pulled a group of crossbred cattle in and they had steer calves on the side. They were still nursing. They were they were creep fed for one group was creep fed for 28 days prior to weaning, one 56 days prior to weaning, and one 84 days prior to weaning. They found that the calves on that 56-day trial were the most efficient in feed intake, therefore they had the highest average daily gain. And then when they started to analyze the rumen itself and look into all the parts that play into it, they found that the pH was decreased, but the propionate increased and the acetate also decreased. And so that led into a decrease in ruminal fiber digestibility and forage intake overall for those groups of cattle that were on this trial. However, if you look at this other creep feeding one, it was a herd of cattle in southeastern North Dakota, and they wanted to look at a creep feeding process that was more forage based and not as much concentrate and grain based. So they supplemented with a mix of wheat middling, soil hulls, molasses, and then they had, I think it was 2.8% limestone mixed in there. And it results showed that the forage-based feeding did not have the negative effects on the microbiome in the ruminant at all. However, not many positive effects were found from it on the microbiome. It did give you an average daily gain, not as high as those concentrate-based creek feeding diets. However, it is a safe bet when you're coming into talking about the microbiome that it won't have that negative effect on them. So there another study where they had 42 cow-calf pairs that were split into 3 test groups on 3 different feeding regimens, and they were analyzing the fecal and the rumen samples at the end about the bacteria that were in it, and they found that they actually varied significantly. But one thing they found that was really interesting to me was the genus of bacteria known as Prevotella was significant in certain groups of cattle, and they found that those cattle also had an average daily gain higher than the rest. So that shows you that positive correlation that can be found between um, that genus of bacteria, average daily gain. So with this study, we were able to find a way of creep feeding or what to creep feed to influence that microbiome in a positive way that allowed for the calf to also reap the benefits as well. So in conclusion of overall of like kind of what this whole project was about, so it's just that creep feeding has been found to be more beneficial than negative on the microbiome in calves. It helps to foster that growth of beneficial bacteria within the calf. So therefore, we're able through all these positives of creep feeding, the calf can get a healthier gut that will also help with average daily gain. To pull this down onto the producer level itself, I believe that if we can continue to better our creep feeding practices, implement them in different ways, and really start to focus on that microbiome of that animal instead of just the main thing you think about, which is growth, we can actually make that animal healthier, make that gut healthier, which will give us that average daily gain that we are looking for in a more positive way, and also could help us influence us throughout the entire phase of this livestock if we're able to foster growth and foster good gut health from the very beginning. That's all I got for y'all today. So thank y'all for listening. My name is Clint Lee, and I hope y'all learned something.